Mette is going to tell us about triggers, amongst other things, about triggers and patient-generated data. So you want to explain who you are and what you did.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. So my name is Mette, and I'm here to tell a little bit about what it is to go from being a disempowered patient to becoming an empowered patient. My situation started out after being sick for 10 years. I showed up at my doctor's office. He told me to expect great news, and he told me I was not going to die in the immediate future. Being an economist, I felt a little ambivalent about this, and I said to him, you know, if I went to the advisory boards of the company I'm a CEO for, and I said, we're not going to go bankrupt in the immediate future, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have a job. So I said, so what are we going to do about my process? And he says, to be fair, we have optimized your process. Your blood work looks amazing this year compared to last year. So you go home, you think a little bit about it, and you decide that there's not really much for me to do here. Aside freaking out, I decided that the one thing I could trust was numbers. I'm a little autistic with numbers, so I started charting everything I did in an Excel spreadsheet. 5 months later, I proved that I wasn't a heart patient, and I'd been taking heart medication for 8 years at the time. I also had a whole range of autoimmune diseases, so I thought, well, if I start just taking them one at a time, I could probably eliminate some of these through this data collection, through looking at the correlations of what's actually going on. So this led me on almost like 1.5 year journey. And I will say that had there been no books available on the disease labels that I had been given, I would probably been able to do this process a lot faster. But being that you read a book, you decide that this seems plausible, you start to copy and see if you could create the same results. In my case, that kind of led me astray a few times. So what I've been doing for the past 5 years is basically trying to help other patients like myself figure out what are the triggers for their autoimmune and confounding cases. So when I was asked to come here by Denise, and thank you very much for having me, I was asked to give a pitch on patient-generated data. And I thought the best way to kind of do that is show you the strength of patient-generated data. I come out of the quantified self movement, and there we have something that is pretty much as simple as this. What did you do? How did you do it? And what did you learn? So what we did first quarter of this year is we had 44 lupus patients from across the US be a part of a lupus beta test. They were all collected through lupus Facebook groups. We didn't know who they were or anything when they were basically taking into the study. So what did we do? We tried to, well, first of all, we didn't meet any of them. We didn't have any base labs. We didn't have any stats. We tried to limit all contact, phone, email, text, to the bare minimum, and try and focus on only the incoming data. That being said, of course, having the right questions, getting the right metrics of data coming in is important. And also here I would like to say that every behavior, no matter how detrimental it is in the long run, always have a rationale governing it. And it's important to have a non-prejudiced approach when you're working with clients in this way. So what did we learn? Out of the 44 patients, most of them had a horrible lifestyle. But even the people who had, by society standards, perfect diets, still were able to curb their symptoms when we identified their triggers. To give you an idea of how this was, my very first call not only just shows a little bit about my approach, but also how clueless I was when it came to lupus. I called up a patient and I said, are you experiencing technical problems? She said, no. I said, so I think we have to exclude you from this test because it demands that data is coming in from your end and you've only had one meal this past week. And she goes, well, I only eat once a week. And it completely baffled me. I didn't even really know what to say at that point because I thought to myself, wow, that is already a completely U-turn from where I was expecting this conversation to go. So we went back and looked at all the data, and we started seeing patterns of things with these patients that we hadn't thought of at first. So at 25% of this group actually only ate a few times a week. 90% of them didn't drink water at all. So there were some demographics that kind of showed up relatively easy to start with. And I want to emphasize two cases that were interesting. One was a 42-year-old woman. She'd been sick for the better part of 10 years. She'd not been working for 5. She was unable to get out of bed. She wasn't able to cook her family a meal. She had 2 kids that basically would come and sit by her bedside. And when I started talking to her about her health history, one of the most interesting things happened, because she said that when she was 8 years old, she had water around her pelvis and she was on crutches. And it made me think, well, whatever it is that she's doing to herself, she's been doing it at least for, 34 years. So when we started with her, bowel movement was all over the place. Everything was pretty much out of mark. So of course you have to stabilize her a bit first. But the minute that we got her back to eating and so on, we could actually look at the correlations of what she ate comparatively to her symptoms. And she had, I don't know if you call it an allergy or sensitivity to nightshades. And the minute we eliminated nightshades, week by week, she got better. The other example comes from the complete other end of the spectrum. This was a 55-year-old from Florida who came in because he lost his job. He had all sorts of other obstacles, but he had heard about it through his lupus forum. And his data came in, and he pretty much had a dashboard as display of his food every single meal. And after a few days, I said, I really don't need to see another burger from Wendy's come in. I even had the nerve to ask him, do you only eat after noon every day because Wendy's don't serve burgers before? And he felt actually really offended by this, not for the reason that all of you would think, because his first meal of the day was always a Jack in the Box. So we kind of looked at his incoming data and decided, starting here, trying to give this guy a manual for good life or healthy living is not really going to make anyone, wiser. And he's definitely not going to be able to change his behavior. So what we did instead was have him just do one thing at a time. Being pre-diabetic on top of things, we gave him a protein shake in the morning. After a week, he had successfully incorporated it into his life. And the following week, I asked him to do Epsom salt bath before he went to bed, because he was on 7 different medications for sleep, or sleep aids. And as weird as these things sounded to him, over time, they really helped him. And we actually got him to a place where he was symptom-free and back to work in 6 weeks. So my next slide is really my key for everything, is most wearable devices today collect data passively. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of data and a lot of meaning that we can make from this. But what we do is a little bit different. We actively track with patients. It's called self-reporting. It's a hassle. It's not for everyone. If you want to lose 3 pounds, we're not your guy. If you've gone through the system and fallen through the cracks and you want to figure out why that is, then you're willing to put in the effort of patient reporting. And I believe that by paying attention, by tracking what you do in lifetime, you're actually going to look at the correlations, find the symptoms, and figure out what is helping you, what triggers could you eliminate in your diet. Last but not least, we've been working with doctors since 2010, and I usually say when I come to a new praxis, we don't expect you to be able to do this from the beginning, because you've never really looked at your clients this way. We look at things a little bit different. We ask very different questions, usually out of range and usually super personal. However, it will change the way that you praxis. And I think the one thing that patient-generated data does is that it changes patients' view on themselves, it empowers them, but it empowers the doctors too. The reason that they're having trouble with these patients, confounding cases have been seen forever, it's because they don't have the right tools. Thank you so much.